You are listening to the regular version of Sexy Marriage Radio. smrnation.com.
Welcome back to another episode of Sexy Marriage Radio, where I got a little distracted because, when we record these at the SMR studio, which is AKA the Allen's house.
Right.
The room we sit in, the window looks out to the pool, and I got a squirrel trying to drink out of the pool on a hot June night.
Want to send the dog out.
And our dog's probably has, if she knew she was out there, it'd be like all kinds of party going on in the backyard. But people didn't listen, they're not tuning into Sexy Marriage Radio for Animal Kingdom.
No.
Although maybe they are. We are all animals.
Okay.
Well, we do try to have conversations that help the Sexy Marriage Nation go further and better, and I kind of lost the thread on that one, but we want to spice things up for the nation.
Yeah.
And we want to help answer the questions that are on their mind. And the way we can do that is when they ask said questions, Pam. And the way they do that is they call us 214-702-9565 or feedback@sexymarriageradio.com, because every email that comes in, we read them. They either go in the queue or we answer them.
Just directly.
It's one of the two things. Yeah.
Answer directly or get on the show.
Absolutely. And so when more voices are joining the conversation, everybody's better.
Mm-hmm.
We also ask that the nation helps us spread the word, rate and review the shows, leave comments, tell your friends, tell your neighbors. 4th of July weekend is coming up. Turn on an episode when you're doing your 4th of July party and just celebrate Sexy Marriage Radio during celebrating the nation's
Independence. Maybe it's your sexual independence. I don't know.
Maybe so. Coming up on today's regular.
What does that really even mean? I have no idea. We got to edit that out. Sexual independence in marriage. I guess that's real.
Coming up on today's regular free version of Sexy Marriage Radio is a conversation. This is an encore presentation of an episode we did with Vanessa Marin, who's a sex therapist and coach on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. And she has, the way I was introduced to her was scrolling around, and I came across her course that she offers, which is one of the best named courses, right up there with Lori Mintz's Becoming Clitorate, as far as a book title.
And it's titled?
She has a book for helping women who struggle with orgasms called, not a book, she has a course that's called Finishing School.
Nice.
To help finish, help figure it out, because there's a lot of women out there that there's this gap. And here at Sexy Marriage Radio, we want to help bridge that gap along with a lot of the other professionals that are out there doing that too.
Right. And
so on the regular version of Sexy Marriage Radio today, Vanessa joins me to talk about some of the most common issues couples face in their sex life. And then on the extended version, which is deeper, longer, and there are no ads, you can subscribe at smrnation.com/SMR Academy. Vanessa and I continue the conversation about sex, but only this time we're focusing on the female side of the equation and female orgasm. So we go into what are the reliable ways and what are her tips that she really believes in and helps people with. So all that's coming up on today's show. So joining me today for this episode of Sexy Marriage Radio is a fellow sex therapist who happens to be of the other gender. And anytime I come across women that are have a lot going for them in regards to the profession, their take, their view, and they're female, I want to get with them to, hey, let's talk about the whole world of sex therapy and how it applies to couples. Because, Vanessa, as you and I were talking right before the show started, I can't carry the weight because I've never been a woman. And so there's a different view in lens. And so Vanessa Marin is joining us for today's, she's a psychotherapist out in the California area, and I won't hold that against you since I live in Texas, Vanessa. But welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to get to have this conversation with you.
Absolutely. So I wanted to dive right in because you do a lot of work. Just mainly you've done a deep dive into the world of sex therapy with people and with couples. And so to start, what are some of the main things you see? Because I'm always curious about trends, commonalities, just what are some of the main things you see in the work that you're doing with couples right now?
Yeah, I think people are always interested in this question, right? We want to know, like, what's going on in other bedrooms? What are other people struggling with?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I see three main issues in my practice. So the first one is women who struggle with orgasm, whether they've never had an orgasm or they can orgasm on their own, but not with a partner.
Okay.
I see men with performance anxiety issues, and I see couples with mismatched sex drives who are really struggling to keep the spark alive and feel connected in the bedroom.
Oh, so what's going on in California is the same thing going on here in the Midwest.
It sure is.
Okay. Well, then now I know. Okay, perfect. So I want to, this is kind of a meandering conversation that I want to have with you, Vanessa. And some of the ones, like I want to table the idea of the women having trouble orgasming or having trouble reaching orgasm with their partner.
All right.
For the extended content. So that's our tease for the day's show.
That's going to be a good one.
I can't wait. But I am curious because we've done just recently several different segments on the idea with men with performance anxiety. And so where do you go with this? Because I want to see where we align and where we're a little different possibly.
Yeah, well, I take a really multifaceted approach to performance issues. So I think most men think, hey, my body's not performing the way I want it to. It's so easy these days to get Viagra, get Cialis.
Yep.
And I think most men think that that's the cure-all. I just need to get the pills.
Yep.
And so I work with so many men who come to me afterwards and they said, I got the pills. They didn't do anything, and now I'm even more freaked out.
Okay.
So it's really important to me to help men recognize that performance issues are not just a purely biological thing.
Correct.
There are so many different factors that can go into it. And so if we can really dig in and explore what exactly is it that's actually going on, rather than putting on this Band-Aid solution of just, tossing you a pill,
right?
Then we can get much more comprehensive and effective solutions going forward.
So do you have a different route? Because there is an issue of performance anxiety that can manifest itself in a lot of different ways, right? I mean, you can have the ED issues, you can have the premature ejaculation issues, you can have the delayed ejaculation issues. I mean, there's so many different things that can happen. But do you come at it from if it's not, obviously there's a biological possibility.
Yes.
Because I mean that there is an element of with blood flow that hey, that's got to be addressed. But there's also the emotion, the context, the anxiety, the mental game. And I'm assuming that's kind of where you probably then start to dig in.
Yeah, so I have a 5 foundation system that I like to use where I kind of go over the 5 main categories of potential causes. So the first one is the physical. So there can be physical issues that are at play, injuries, illnesses, medications, all kinds of stuff.
Yep.
There's mental, what sort of thoughts are going through your head? What sort of expectations do you have of yourself? How do you think you're supposed to perform in the bedroom and show up? There's emotional. So sometimes, there might be, you're dealing with shame or embarrassment around sex, just negative feelings about sex in general. All of us have to deal with that.
Right.
There's relational. So what happens in your relationship?
Yep.
So, all men are going to experience occasional performance issues, but if there's a really bad reaction from your partner, let's say your partner freaks out, they think, you're not attracted to me anymore, our sex life is dead, that's going to create a lot of tension and make it more likely to go forward. And so it's just, what does your sex life even look like with your partner? And then the fifth one is sensual. So that gets more into what kind of sex are you having? How are you approaching it? Are you taking a really, rushed, anxious approach to it? What does sex look like, when you're on your own masturbating too?
Right.
That can be a huge component. So yeah, if we go through those 5 foundations, then we almost always find, some major cause, usually a couple of different causes.
Yeah, I can almost see that's a great little, I'm almost picturing it as like you're creating this little, it's a diagram of circles and you're just working through each one and you're going to start to find major overlaps or times where one circle is much larger than the others.
Absolutely.
Because of the list. And then that's where you start, which I see that as members of the Sexy Marriage Radio Nation can do that. Just listening to this.
That's
a proactive because I don't mean, speaking as a man that's been sexually active with his wife for a long time now, you're spot on in that all of us face varying levels of issues.
Yeah.
Right. Where it doesn't always go as planned. And so,
our bodies do not always do what we want them to do.
No, they don't. Especially as you get further along in life. And there's this element of like, okay, I'm going to need a little assistance here in some way, shape, or form. So it's seeing this through the idea of, okay, there's multifacets going on. There's a whole lot of possibilities. Let's not rush to judgment, is kind of what you're saying.
Absolutely.
I'm broken, because I would want to challenge it as, that kind of just means you're normal. Welcome to being human.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That things don't always work the way you hope.
Yeah, I think that's such an important thing that most men don't realize. All men experience performance issues from time to time. I mean, I just said, our bodies don't always do what we want them to do. Our bodies aren't robots. And so if a man can recognize, okay, this happens from time to time, I roll with the punches, you're going to be fine. But what often happens is that, he'll get up into his head thinking, I am broken, something's horribly wrong. And that just makes it worse and worse. So I think if we can just approach it, for men and women, kind of approach our sex lives with a sense of curiosity. Like, okay,
absolutely.
Things aren't going exactly the way that I want them to be right now, but can I get curious and see what might be going on? And so, you can go through those 5 foundations that I just listed on your own. And if you kind of think through, all right, what might be going on for me in this area? You can really discover a lot. Yeah.
And I'm almost hearing this too, Vanessa, as that's a good route for a spouse, for a wife to go through, because you even mentioned relationally, she can take his issue personal when it could be a small percentage of the dynamic, but it's probably not. Most performance issues that I've come across and experienced have nothing to do with my wife. It's my own head and weird little world going on.
Yeah, I have never worked with a man where the main issue or even a major issue was his level of attraction to his partner. It's just not a thing.
Right.
But unfortunately, so many women take performance issues really, really personally.
Right.
And I've done that myself too. It is very easy to take it personally, but it's just so important for us to recognize that it's not. And when we do take it personally, we're just contributing to the issue and making it much more likely to continue happening.
Right. Well, that's when the power of what you're describing of how do we take a curiosity approach? How do we do a, hey, I wonder what, and not, because it seems like we could do that. Tell me if I'm wrong. And I don't think this is a male centric thing only, but we have a time as humans that when something goes wrong or different, don't we often tend to jump to the worst case?
Yeah,
right?
We definitely do.
Okay, he's this or that, or she's this or that, rather than, hold on, what else could it be?
Yeah.
So our sponsors today, Pam, we have the Adventure Challenge In Bed Edition, which is a book full of 50 unique romantic ideas for you and your partner to do together and spice up your intimacy in and out of the bedroom. And it's very simple, Pam. I mean, we've used these books before. All you do is you pick a challenge together, you scratch it off, you follow the instructions for an experience that we promise could lead you to be doing something you've never done before. And it's worth noting, the thing that it might lead you to be doing that you've never done before, it's not necessarily Kama Sutra or new positions, or it's new presence and activities involved in how you get to the sexual encounters, what you may do during, who you are during. So it's the whole picture. It's not just a book of positions. And that's worth noting because the Adventure Challenge actually does bring and put the word play back in your foreplay. And it puts exciting and adventure back in your sex life.
I love their books. They're so creative.
Yeah, we absolutely love the Adventure Challenge In Bed Edition, and we think you will too. So go to theadventurechallenge.com, use our code SMR20, and this will get you 20% off their books.
Sweet.
This book helps you connect emotionally and physically. And let's face it, Pam, connected sex equals better sex. Go to theadventurechallenge.com and use our code SMR20 and get 20% off.
And especially with sex, because it is such a sensitive topic, we don't have a lot of resources. A lot of us really struggle with it. So when something goes wrong in our sex life, yeah, we do tend to go to the absolute worst case scenario.
Okay. And so I want to pivot just real quick because you also make comments on how, just with some of the work you do, some of the stuff you've written, how do you just keep... I think I'm stumbling around trying to think of how to frame this the best, but there's an element of married life sex is different because it's the same person, right? And so then you run into this issue of how do we keep it exciting? How do we keep it engaging? How do we keep it have a spark, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I think the main, the first thing that I want to talk about here is shifting our mindset around it. I think most of us believe that great sex is something that's just supposed to happen because that's really the only way we ever see it, right? In the movies, people just have this immediate, instantaneous, crazy chemistry and, they sort of live happily ever after with that chemistry. And so a lot of people go into relationships with those same expectations. It should be amazing right off the bat, and it should just continue to be amazing. And I've seen a lot of people who end up, leaving relationships because that spark starts to fade and they think, oh, this person isn't the right person for me. Right. It must not be, a good fit. And so I really like to encourage people to recognize that great sex requires great effort. Okay. It's something that we have to work on throughout the course of our relationship. Okay. So that's just a really big mindset shift to make. If we can recognize, okay, it's not something that's just going to happen. It's something that we make happen. Then that opens up the door for a lot of possibilities.
I love it because I frame it in very similar, just the terminology is different of, I just say sex in general, but for sure, great sex doesn't happen by accident. There has to be an element of intentionality, dedication, effort, energy, knowledge, curiosity. I mean, there's a whole lot of things because that's the whole, we do come into this, don't we, with the idea of, well, it'll just happen. It'll just flow. It'll just be simple and,
natural. That's my favorite word.
Right. Well, I use the joke when I'm speaking. Like I've had, the winter and spring is the time where I go speak to a lot of moms groups in the churches nearby. And I actually did this in just the other day where I just made the comment and kind of got off on this tangent that I tend to do with the idea that, sex doesn't happen by accident. You don't just trip and fall and all of a sudden you're in your wife's vagina, right? It's just because if that's the case, one, what is she doing laying on the ground like that, just waiting for you? I mean, no woman just does that. So it's just the idea of recognizing there are so many myths that just trip us up.
There really are. Yeah, I feel like half of my job is really just dispelling myths and telling people, nope, it doesn't actually work like that. That's just what you've seen in the movies or on TV. It's not really how it works. But yeah, it's because we don't have any great resources that so many people are operating off of all of these myths, and it's really damaging our sex lives.
Absolutely. And so once you get a little bit of the myth busted, what and then you're talking about great sex comes from great effort. Are there some go-tos that couples can enhance and be sure they are doing that help?
Yeah, so there are a ton of different things that you can do. One of my favorite things to talk about, and that might be a little bit controversial, is actually to schedule sex. So I think that a lot of people have this idea, you hear the phrase scheduling sex and it just sounds really depressing. Oh man, our sex life is so bad. Now we have to schedule it the way that we, schedule dentist appointments. And I actually used to feel the exact same way about scheduled sex. At the beginning of my career, I thought it was one of the worst ideas I'd ever heard of. Okay. But
so what brought you around?
What actually brought me around was my husband and I having struggles in our own sex life, of having a period of our relationship where we were both really, really busy, really stressed out. It felt like there just wasn't any time for us. And, my husband sort of stumbled upon the idea and said, you know what, we just need to schedule days and pick times where we make sure we're going to do this. And I hated it at first. I was so upset with him. And I said, oh my God, I took it super personally. My husband must not be attracted to me anymore. He has to schedule it with me. But we ended up just really playing around with it. And believe it or not, it actually ended up really, really working for us. And so we found different ways of playing with it where it's not this really clinical, okay, Tuesday at 7:13 p.m., we will meet in the bedroom. And, so it's really become an amazing way for us of guaranteeing that we have time carved out for each other and that we build up this excitement and this energy and anticipation around it. The same sort of way, we have date nights where we go out and, we go to a restaurant, we go to a concert, whatever it is that you feel excited about that. We feel excited about, hey, we've got sexy date night with each other.
Okay. So I got a question now, because I'm in the same camp, and I don't call the scheduling controversial. And I take more the stance of, I know for some couples it's going to work. Yeah. For Pam and I, it does not work. I mean, it's because we're in some regards, it's that flip side of the equation where, yes, it can really create the anticipatory energy, but it also creates the pressure of, oh, I know it's coming. Oh, and so this is where I want to at least pick your brain, because I think this is good information to know. How do you challenge that dynamic if that's within yourself? Because I know some listeners are going to hear that as, oh, that's a pressure cooker. Because they even look at date night that way, of just knowing, oh, I'm going to have to perform today, and I really don't want to. And that's just that way that energy is being used against them rather than them using the energy. So
so I got a solution for you.
I want to hear it. Let's go.
So I dealt with this as well, kind of in that period where we were trying to play around with this and see, is this going to work for us or not? I felt some of that pressure. Sure. And there would be times where it's like, oh God, we have to tonight. So what I came up with is this idea, I call it the easy win activity. So what you do is you pick some sort of activity that involves touch in any way that you would always feel open to. So no matter what, you have a terrible day, you're in a bad mood, no matter what, you're always open to doing this with your partner. Okay. So for most couples, this is going to be something really simple. It might be cuddling. Right. It might be a little kiss. It might be a hug. So it's something really, the bar is pretty low here. So when you schedule a sexy date night, you are just agreeing to do that bare minimum activity with each other. Okay. So that really lessens the pressure because it's something that you do enjoy, you do look forward to. I don't have any expectation to go further than that. Okay. And what you'll find in reality, doing this is that if you set that bar really low for yourself, if you start off with something that you enjoy doing, you're getting some touch with your partner, the oxytocin's flowing. Right. A lot of times you wind up feeling open to doing more than that. Because
then you're just talking about, how do I get past the first barrier?
It's really, it's that first step. So if it's something that, a lot of couples will tell me, I love cuddling with my partner. I will always cuddle with my partner, So it's if you just get over that first barrier, then you're cuddling, you're feeling good. You're thinking, okay, well, maybe a little bit more sounds good.
Okay. Yeah. I like it, because I think that's, again, this is just how, we hear Sexy Marriage Radio. It sounds like you kind of have this very, very similar philosophy of what works for people is what matters. Right? Exactly. That there's not, if you and I would love this if we could figure out a way to do this, but if you and I could create the end all be all, here's the 3-step process to have fantastic, great sex every single time, we would be the world's first trillionaires.
Yes.
Because everybody wants it. It just doesn't exist because there's too many nuances, too many unique situations. Yeah. And things that mean, okay, I'm going to have to try this out. And this is where we go back to what you mentioned earlier. How do I just be curious about my whole sexual evolving in my relationship and as a person?
Exactly. And so, so many of my approaches that I've come up with, it really comes back to that curiosity and that willingness to experiment. So I think a lot of us, we have this kind of perfectionism that's come up around sex. Like, I don't want to try that thing unless I know I'm going to love it and it's going to be perfect. Right. And so that's another big myth about sex. There's no such thing as perfect sex. So if we can take a different approach and think, I'm willing to experiment. I'm willing to try some things. Maybe I try this thing and I don't love it. Maybe I try it and I do love it. So it's, that kind of approach is really going to save your sex life and just make it so much more open, so much less pressure.
Yeah.
And then it just feels playful too. We don't take it quite so seriously.
Absolutely. I mean, sex is a serious subject, but man, we don't have to approach it so much like that.
We really don't. And, a lot of times, like, think about what's your favorite time, your favorite memories having sex with your partner. For most people, it's not this like super serious, very intense kind of thing. It's like, it's those moments where we feel really light and playful and we're laughing with each other and we're making eye contact and we just feel so connected to our partner.
That's great.
So that's the kind of sex that I really like to help people have.
That's good, because the world needs more of that, especially in marriage, because
absolutely
it does become this thing that has a different weight to it, unless we can challenge a lot of these myths that we're kind of talking about.
Absolutely.
Well, Vanessa, tell I got to let everybody know, how do they find you? Because I like what you've got going on.
Thank you.
A whole lot, and I want other people to know it too. So what's the best way they can find more about you?
Yeah, so they can come on over to vmtherapy.com. It's VM, my initials, THERAPY.com. And I would encourage everyone to sign up for our email list. So we send out an email every Friday with free tips, tricks, advice, resources. My husband is a part of my business as well. So sometimes we do kind of, from the male perspective, from the female perspective. So we have a great community of people, and we'd love for you guys to join us there.
Well, that'll all be in the show notes, so be sure to check it out, because, we all can use more curiosity and tips and tricks when it comes to making our life better in the long run. So, Vanessa, thanks again for spending a little time, and I'm excited about where we're going next. So,
yes, me too. Thanks for having me.
So I'm kind of enjoying this at times. We've been doing some of these Encore presentations and going back into the archives and bringing them back up forward, because there's just a wealth of information. Pam, we've been doing this for over 10 years.
Yeah.
That's a lot of episodes that have been going on.
Yeah. And people that are recently binging might say, I just heard this one not too long ago. But for most people, these are ones that are most downloaded episodes, but we got most responses or things like that really seem to hit home.
Right.
And some of them are just really beneficial to.
And let's face it, there's a lot of marriages going on where wives are having real struggle figuring out early on, midway through, and maybe towards the end as well. Way into it.
Right.
And it's just, so if there's ways that we can help bridge the gap, man, I think everybody gets improved and better from that.
Agreed.
Well, this has been Sexy Marriage Radio. If we left something undone, let us know. 214-702-9565 or feedback@sexymarriageradio.com. We'll see you next time.